welcome once again. And now we can actually go into the thing we all came here for, which is the debate. But shortly, I'd like to just tell you a little bit about the project we're doing now. It's an Erasmus Plus project, which we're collaborating with Europahuis Ryckevelde in Belgium and Crosol in Croatia about. And it's a 3-year project where we make online debates, workshops, and ebooks together about the green transition and rule of law. In this project, we're focusing on the green transition, and we're looking at how, both at the EU level and at a national member state level, how the different countries are tackling the transition. And in this context, we're now making an online debate where we're going to focus on a bit of a actual topic, which is the current energy crisis, and we're looking at how it affects the EU plans and the member states' plans in trying to actually fulfill the targets of the Green Deal, which is making an energy neutral EU by 2050. Because energy, and especially gas, was going to have played a big part in this transitional phase. But we have invited 3 experts from Denmark, Belgium, and Croatia to tell us about the different national perspectives. And the first is Julie Bangsgaard Abrahams from Denmark, who's an advisor on energy in the Danish NGO Green Transition, and she focuses on energy efficiency and outphasing of fossil energy. Then we've also invited Mathieu Blondeel, who's a research fellow from Warwick University, and he's a specialist in the geopolitics of energy. We've also invited Goran Čačić from Croatia, and he has a background in energy conservation, management, efficiency, and renewable energy. And he's actually involved with the Green Energy Cooperative and Terra Hub in Croatia. Each expert will have a few minutes to introduce their perspective and their presentation, and around half an hour later, we'll have like a questionnaire round where everybody will be able to ask the questions to each of the participants. So the first person on today is Julie Bangsgaard Abrahams from Denmark. Yeah, take it away.
Yes, I'll just share my screen now. And can you see it in the presentation? Oh, perfect. Yes, so first of all, thank you so much for inviting me to this debate. And the idea behind this presentation is to tell you a bit about the overall climate targets in Denmark, and then give you an example on how the EU legislation influences the Danish politics. And I just want you to keep in mind that I'm from an NGO. So if I sound a bit skeptical about the Danish government's ambition level, that's why. So yeah, the overall EU target, Marcus mentioned it as well. Oh, I will just close you here. It's in the European Green Deal, we have a target on 0 emissions from 2050. And in the Fit for 55, the EU and the European member states agreed on reducing the net greenhouse gas emissions by at least 55% by 2030, when we compare it to the levels from the 1990. And if we go to the overall Danish targets, they are from the Danish Climate Act or Danish Climate Law from 2020. And we have a target on no net emissions no net emissions of greenhouse gases in Denmark by 2050. So that's the same as in the EU. And just a side note, the Danish government, they know that they need carbon capture, so this kind of negative emissions, because we won't be able to transition the agricultural sector in Denmark in 2050. But all fossil fuels, so all the energy, the fossil energy will be phased out in 2050 in Denmark. Then we have a target for 2025 over here, and that's a reduction from 50 to 54%. And where the EU have the 55% reduction in 2030, it's 70 in Denmark. So I would like to explain how we're doing in Denmark, and I will show you this figure, this graph over here first. I don't know if you can see my mouse running around, but the word in the middle, that's just greenhouse gases. And it's a graph showing the plan of CO2 emissions reductions from the Danish government from 2020. And it's famously known as the hockey stick, and has been criticized because the plan from the government is to wait with the large CO2 reductions until 2026, and then they want to speed up afterwards. So you'll see we will emit a lot of greenhouse gases until then in Denmark. And as a part of the Danish Climate Act in 2020, the Danish Council on Climate Change was formed. It's called DCC, and they make an assessment of the likelihood of achieving all these climate targets that the government has. And here, this is a quote from their assessment in February this year, and they said that the government's climate efforts will not demonstrate how we will reach the target for a 75% reduction in emissions by 2030. So that's where we are right now. And all the reductions that they say we will have, they are at a high risk right now, because it's based upon really insecure technologies. Not really insecure, but technologies like Power-to-X and carbon capture and storage. Yes. Yeah, so we have this conclusion that the Danish Council on Climate Change is saying that even though we have a higher target in Denmark on 70% instead of the 55 for EU, we can't expect just to automatically meet all the EU obligations in Denmark for now. And then I'd like to give you an example of the necessity of EU regulation. And yeah, I hope I have time, otherwise just cut me off. But I would like to explain the situation in Denmark, and it's the same as in every other EU member state. We have a high increase of the gas prices, of course, due to the Putin's war in Ukraine. And the situation is that we use 45% of our gas consumption in Denmark in heating, and that's the district heating over here, and in gas boilers in households. And yeah, it emits 5 million tons of CO2 every year. So the gas boilers, they are for individual heating, and it's not really a big issue in Denmark compared to a lot of other member states. That's why I think it could be exciting to explain about here, because 75% of all buildings in Denmark is on district heating or heated with district heating. And we only have 380,000 gas boilers left. And that's a small amount compared to other countries. But yeah, we have a problem with the gas boilers no matter what, even though we don't have a lot here, because their lifespan is 20 years. And it would be really important to get a ban on new installations of gas boilers, so we will avoid this fossil lock-in after 2050. Because if you buy a fossil boiler in, let's say, 2030, then there is a chance that it will still be working for the next 20 or maybe 25 or 30 years afterwards. But, oh, that was too fast. But in February 2022, this year, the Danish government said that they will not make a ban on gas boilers, and it won't be implemented in Denmark. But luckily, the EU was more ambitious. So in the Repower EU plan from May, they say that there should not be new fossil boilers on the market from 2029. And the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive EPBD, in their proposal from the Commission, they introduces a clear legal basis for national bans on fossil boilers. So now the Danish government would present a stop for new fossil boilers installation this month. Yeah. So that's just a way to show that when the EU is ambitious and the regulation is stricter, it can make sure that the member states are ambitious as well. Yeah, and that was just the thing I would like to say here, but I can talk a lot more about initiatives from the Danish government, or the war in Ukraine, how it affects Denmark, and how we are responding to the different EU directives like energy efficiency and renewable energy, and the one for energy performance in buildings. But yeah, thank you.
Thanks a lot. I'm sure we'll go back to some of your points later on in the question round. But now it's Mathieu Blondeel's turn to make his presentation. Here you go.
Yeah, thank you very much, Marcus, and also thank you very much for having me here today and for allowing me to talk you guys through what's happening in Belgium in terms of the energy transition and how we are affected in Belgium by the energy crisis, which is evidently in the first place a crisis that is primarily caused by the illegal invasion by Russia in Ukraine, and second, not necessarily an energy crisis, but I believe a fossil fuel crisis. So maybe that's an important nuance already to make at the outset of the presentation. I haven't prepared slides, so I'm sorry for that. And my focus is also going to be slightly different from that of Julie. And I really want to talk about the concrete impact on Belgium and the energy transition in Belgium of the current crisis, some of the policies and decisions that have been made in recent months to soften the blow of the crisis, and then also talk you guys through some of the main difficulties that we face in Belgium in terms of accelerating the transition. So as you all know, I mean, the energy crisis, the war in Ukraine has had a major effect on prices and inflation as a whole, not just in Belgium, but in the European Union as a whole, and well beyond the European Union, but that's another issue. Not necessarily because in Belgium we are physically dependent on Russian fossil fuels. For example, only 4 to 6% of our gas imports came from Russia pre-war. If you compare that to Germany, for example, 55% of their gas imports came from Russia. So they were physically far more dependent on Russia. But of course, gas prices, for example, wholesale energy prices are determined at a European level, So any country or any setback in terms of imports and energy trade that happens in one country will have price effects elsewhere as well. So that's how we in Belgium are primarily impacted. It's not about the physical supply of energy or natural gas, specifically, it's about affordability of energy. Now, a number of major short and midterm initiatives have been undertaken by the government to shield consumers, so households, but also businesses, from these massive price spikes that we're faced with. Unfortunately, I don't have the time to list all of them, but let me just name a few that I think are most relevant to spur some discussion as well. Some of the most significant ones. First one is the phase out of nuclear power plants. So in 2021, the National Coalition Government decided that by 2025, we have to phase out all our remaining nuclear power plants. Now, that was already quite a controversial political decision, but with the war in Ukraine and the energy crisis, earlier this year, the national government has decided that they're going to, of the 7 that were to close, 7 reactors, 2 will remain open beyond 2025, for at least 10 years, for at least another 10 years until 2035. So that's one major impactful decision, policy decision. That's the prolongation, if you will, of the lifetime of these nuclear power plants. A second one, which I think is really relevant as well, is that in Belgium, we used to pay 21% VAT on energy, electricity, and gas bills. Now, under this government, in the context of the crisis as well, that was reduced from 21% to 6%. That was supposed to be a temporary measure, but the national government a couple of months ago has decided to make this permanent. This, reduction in taxes that you have to pay on your energy bills from 21% to 6%. So that's quite a significant measure to deal with the energy crisis, of course. A third one, which I think is really useful as well, primarily because this is very targeted support, and that is that Belgium is quite unique in the world in that already before the current crisis, we have a so-called social tariff in place, a social tariff on energy for low-income households and those households or persons living on state benefits. And this social tariff, which is basically a lower tariff on your energy bills for those specific target groups, this scheme was expanded to include a larger part of the population, as the price hikes, of course, had major impacts on lower middle class households as well. And so today, around 2 million people benefit from this social tariff for energy, which is double the amount of people that used to benefit off this pre-crisis. So they've expanded the scheme, and so more people can now access these measures of the social tariff, which I think is really significant as well. And as I said, what is good about this is that it's not a subsidy or a scheme that everyone can use. It's very targeted support to lower income households and lower middle class households that are primarily affected, of course, by these price hikes. And then I guess more broadly, Belgium also is now looking to expand its renewable energy, primarily its wind energy offshore, and not just within its national offshore, exclusive economic zone, but also in cooperation with other European partners under the umbrella of this so-called North Seas Energy Cooperation that some of you might be familiar with. And so I think Denmark is part of it as well. Croatia obviously isn't, as it's not that close to the North Sea, of course. But I mean, the members of this North Sea Energy Cooperation in September 2022 have set new, more ambitious aggregate targets of reaching at least 260 gigawatts of offshore wind energy by 2050. Currently, Belgium has 1.9 gigawatts of offshore wind. So that, I mean, of course, this is cooperation with other countries as well, but for Belgium, that would mean significantly hiking its offshore wind capacity. Do I have a couple of minutes left? Because I think, so just in summary, what I think is important here is that the question really is, first of all, how permanent are these reforms? Some reforms are really interesting, really good. How in the long term, or to what extent in the long term, are we going to live up to the promises that we're making here, such as the whole renewable offshore wind issue together with the partners in the North Seas Energy Cooperation? And I think second also, what are the impacts of the other short-term measures that are being taken? Because of course, a lot of subsidies are now being implemented, not just in Belgium, but also elsewhere too. To shield consumers, again, households and businesses from the major impacts of the current price hikes. But that also includes not just subsidies for renewables, but primarily, especially as the crisis is very acute, subsidy schemes and financial support for fossil fuel consumption as well, such as, for example, heating oil in Belgium. So are there ways to deal with this issue of, at the one hand, dealing with the very urgent energy crisis, and at the other hand, subsidizing not fossil fuels, but energy efficiency, renewables, et cetera, et cetera. And that's a key issue that in Belgium we're dealing with. And just coming to my final point, if I may, if there's a couple of minutes left. Okay, thanks, Marcus. an interesting question that you guys asked me in the emails beforehand is to think about, so what are the major obstacles in Belgium for an acceleration of the energy transition? And there, I think it's all of, there's this famous phrase by Bill Clinton, I think, that made him win the election for US president in the early 90s, where he said, it's all about it's the economy, stupid. But I think it's the politics, stupid, because in Belgium, the major issue is the fact that we're a federal country with different levels of government that have different competing and often overlapping responsibilities. So some topics on energy and climate are dealt with at the federal national level, others are dealt with at the regional level. And because our coalition governments aren't the same at the national level as they are at the regional level, this often leads to political conflict between policymakers and politicians at different levels. And in Dutch, we do really have a really nice phrase for that roughly translates to a system of belligerent federalism that we have today in Belgium. And there's a couple of examples, but I can keep that for later on, around the phase out of nuclear energy in Belgium, where you definitely see a concrete example of this belligerent federalism that exists today in Belgium. But yeah, like I said, I think the major obstacle in Belgium isn't necessarily economically or financially. We're together with the rest of Western Europe, among the richest countries in the world. There is enough finance, there is enough financial support from a government level. Businesses as well are eager to invest in the energy transition. I think it's an issue of policies and politics. So I'll leave it at that, and happy to engage with the audience in the Q&A. Thanks.
Thanks a lot. Very, very interesting. I'm sure there's going to be some questions about the administrative conflicts in Belgium. Very, very interesting. Next speaker is Goran Čačić from Croatia.
Yeah, thanks. Good afternoon to everybody. It's at the beginning when we were chatting, I said, that some of the EU countries are quite more advanced in regarding the green energy transition and implementation of this plan. But hearing these two examples, I see that similar problems do arise in the advanced countries as well as in Croatia. We are the youngest country that joined the EU, and if we say that the more advanced countries are finishing the high school, starting the faculty regarding the green transition and then sustainability, we are finishing primary school, maybe starting the high school. And we all know, it's the full of puberty, and then we don't know what to do and how to react. And Croatia, unfortunately, is like that. So basically, even before this energy crisis, we didn't know what to do and how to achieve the targets that are set by the green plan. We said, okay, we will do it. Our strategies said, okay, we will fill up to the standards that EU is setting for everybody of us. How? That's another question. We will deal it later on. But on paper, we are going through the transition, and we are planning to achieve it. Potentials in Croatia compared to the northern or more northern countries are enormous, especially for the sun energy. We have even some wind energy, good locations. We have some forests, so renewables are quite accessible. And some of the more advanced experts are saying that it is possible to reach 100% renewable energy in Croatia by 2030 or 2035. So within the next 10 years, if we want and if we invest enough resources, we can achieve 100% renewable energy sources for Croatia and even for export. That's what scholars and experts say, but politicians, of course, do not listen often to the scholars and experts. They have their own plans that last, unfortunately, just 4 years until the next elections. And this is something that is killing the activities in Croatia. We have 120 strategies in Croatia, and we don't have the overall target and overall goal where to go. I like to say every department in the ministry has their own strategy which they are implementing, and there is no coherency and adjustment between all these strategies. Luckily for us, Croatia is small. unfortunately, we killed our big industry during the 90s. We don't have any big industrial energy use. So basically, this energy crisis, which is currently happening, did not cause too great of problems for Croatia. It caused financial increase of the prices. And then government started to drop money, so they stopped they started to regulate the prices of electricity, of heat, of gas. So basically, to lower the impact on the general population, mainly on citizens, and they even started to look a bit more to enable the installation of the solar. So they removed the VAT, for example, on installation of solar panels and PV. But in general, I must say that we still do not have the clear strategy. We still do not have, proper mentality or proper will to change the mentality to actually achieve the changes that are needed to be zero emission of CO2 during until 2050, and this will be the biggest issue in Croatia. So I would say that this energy crisis that happened had a negative effect on the green transition in Croatia, because it shifted the focus on other problems that are around us, the economical problems, potential recession which is coming as well, and the increase of prices of the energy. So basically, we are going step back to the survival mode. Okay, let's just secure the minimum, and we will not think about, these shiny goals of being 100 renewable % and self-sufficient for energy. This we will leave for some good times. But my personal opinion is that those good times are not coming, unfortunately, for us, and that we do not have a time for slowly to transition to completely 100% renewable economy and energy. We need to start to make big jumps if we want to save the planet. On question marks, why? I don't think that the planet will adjust to a new equilibrium point, but the question is whether will we as a humanity and our civilization be able to survive this new equilibrium point, which is coming by the increase of the temperature. So not to discuss anymore, I would like to answer the questions. So Croatia, unfortunately, after this energy crisis, is standing even poorer than before. What we are doing through our activities, through Terra Hub and Green Energy Cooperative, we are trying to push from the bottom. Sometimes it works, sometimes not. We are trying to motivate people and citizens to do as much as possible by themselves, and to put the pressure to the politicians to think longer than 4 years, and to try to really change things, not incrementally, but with big steps forward.
Perfect. Thanks a lot. Different challenges in Croatia, so to say, whether the financial potential crisis, so to say, might be affecting you a bit more. This was the first round, and like we finished the first part of it now, and we have received some questions that I know Tina would like to ask the experts about.
Yes, the first question is for you, Mathieu Blondeel, and it is from Knives Moisik. Sorry for my pronunciation. The person asked, what are the criteria for this expanded targeted support in Belgium?
So, I mean, like I said, so it used to be the case that it was primarily people that lived under a specific income thresholds as a household, and also people that didn't have a job, so people that lived off state benefits, people with disabilities, etc. So it was a very targeted group of people that would benefit from this. They've expanded the criteria. I am very sorry, but I do not know them off the top of my head, but I do know that the criteria that has expanded is people, for example, or one group of people that have now been included that can benefit from the social tariff is people that have a job, so not necessarily reliant on state benefits, but those that so have a job, they work, but their income falls under the national poverty line, for example. And so already these people had access to some sort of benefits that existed for the government because of the fact that they were working, but their income wasn't as high as the national poverty line. But their income was too high to benefit from this specific social tariff mechanism. Those people have been included, for example. So that's a significant amount of people that now have been included. It's also other groups of people, but that I don't know which other ones they were in particular, but this is one group of people that already had the, what's the word, the verhoogde tegemoetkoming, it's called in Dutch. So I have no idea how I'd have to translate that into English, let alone in Danish or Croatian. But anyway, so it has been expanded. And like I said, it used to be, so it's now 2 million people or 975,000 households, and it used to be half of that. So it is a significant expansion.
Great, thank you. And we have another question.
Yeah, we have a question from Thomas, and please turn on your microphone, Thomas, and ask the question.
Yeah, do I get through clearly?
You're in.
Okay, it's I think disagreeing with the fine gentleman Mathieu about money, because I live in Denmark and we have a company who melts old iron, and they melt 7 tons of iron every 20 minutes. For that, they need to use the energy for what it takes, in what do you call it, a yearly energy consumption for a household, for almost 2,000 households. They are not allowed, or they are allowed to heat up the fabric with that the waste heat, but it's too expensive because there's taxation on it. Now they have removed it, but it was too expensive to do that. It was more cheap to buy heat from outside the fabric, so they just release it out in the air. And in Denmark, I also hear a lot of they want to build new windmill parks offshore and on the land. But when I go to work, they drive past a lot of windmills, and 1/3 of them is always standing still. And if it's maintenance problems, then you have a huge problem because they're standing still. So many, why are we building more? And if it's not maintenance, then why was the point of building more if it's just standing still? So I think it's a huge money problem, and I think my solution, I want to hear your answer for it, is we don't let the government do as much more, but make it more cheaply for the private citizen of the countries to invest in the self-independent energy instead of making the state invest in the independent energy. I hope we get somewhat clear through.
Yeah. I mean, I get the point, and I absolutely agree with you on. I mean, you've made several comments, and I'll try to address them in one answer. So basically, what I hear from you, and I completely agree with that, is that there's no silver bullet technology. There's no silver bullet solution that basically says, okay, so if on a very large scale, we introduce this technology and we focus and zoom in on this one technology once and for all, that's going to solve all our problems. That doesn't exist, that one silver bullet. So I completely agree with you that you're going to need different things at the same time, because different issues around CO2 emissions, greenhouse gas emissions, and decarbonization, they need different solutions. There's no one size fits all solution to this. So like you said, heat that can be trapped and that can then be used for district heating, etc. That sort of stuff needs to be rolled out as well, as soon as possible, because I mean this rest heat, it's something that is quite evident that could definitely work in terms of district heating, and one company providing heat to a specific district or region that could definitely work. Now, what your point about, well, I guess the intermittency of renewables and the intermittency of windmills, in the sense that the wind isn't always blowing and the sun isn't always shining, I completely agree with you as well there. So it's not a solution to only focus on wind and solar energy. We need to focus on heat pumps as well for heating. We need district heating. We need energy efficiency. We need insulation. We need perhaps a little bit of nuclear as well as baseload power. That's, I mean, I'm going to leave that out in the middle because I don't want to get into the politics of the nuclear question as well. So, I mean, completely agree with the fact that there's no silver bullet solution to that. Second point about what can governments do. Yeah, I mean, they're there to create a specific framework in which these companies can operate, not just companies, but households as well. So, I mean, it's true that the whole energy system is going to change fundamentally. It's like you said, we're going to be moving from very centralized system of electricity generation, big gas plants, big nuclear plants, big coal-fired power station, to more distributed forms of energy. And your policy and legal framework is going to change there as well. So that's where governments are important. But governments are also important in terms of giving financial incentives through subsidies, through tax breaks, etc., for these new technologies in order for them to scale up, so that they become affordable to people with less financial firepower than big corporations or high-income households. So I agree with you, but I think that, I mean, the government does have an important role to play as well there. It's not just the market that will solve the issue.
Thank you. Thank you for your answer. And I actually think we have another question.
Yeah, we have a question from Lilian Nielsen to Goran. If you can turn on your microphone, Lilian.
Yes, I can. Hello, Goran. I would like to, you mentioned that there is a lack of clear strategy from the government side, and the politicians more or less are focusing on survival. How are the subsidies that you get from the EU with green conditions? How are they being received in Croatia? Like the Fit for 55 money that has been given out.
If the question is how are we utilizing the available funds, my answer would be poorly. Unfortunately, the ministries which are in charge for implementation of these kind of national programs are undercapacitated, and they are not preparing the projects fast enough, and they don't have the right expertise to implement them, unfortunately. And often, due to the lack of knowledge and expertise, they do set even higher standards and condition for utilization of the funds than the EU initially sets, just to cover themselves for not making some wrong step and being responsible for doing something wrong. So unfortunately, we do use the funds. We received the assistance from the EU, but this was just like, you know, shower of money. It was distributed to everybody the same. So we don't have any clear criterias who should receive such as a social status of the recipients or anything else like that. So it's everybody gets small amount. So it's easy for us to distribute and politically easy to defend.
Sorry, can I just add another question to this one? Is it a lack of capacity or lack of will?
Lack of? What was the second word?
Lack of will, if they don't want to.
I would say both. It's the lack of capacity. I mean, you don't have enough people to work. You know, you lose the will to do something. In some cases, it's lack of knowledge and expertise. Unfortunately, in the public sector, we have a lot of poor people who are coming to the positions, not through the expertise and through the knowledge they have, but just through the position and the fact that they are part of a party which is governing the country at that point. And these persons are not capable of delivering all the big changes that needs to become. And then, we are doing the minimum, so we are not blamed. This is the case in Croatia. And as I said, my opinion is that we are in, pardon my French, we are in deep shit right now already. It won't get any better. And we don't have time to not do anything or just do some small changes and wait for somebody else to do. We need to try to innovate. We need to try to find the silver bullet. I know that it's not there, it's not happening, but I don't think that the approaches from history that brought us in this position will help us to get out of this position. So we need to innovate. We need to try something new. We need to try something different. And it needs to be multidisciplinary. It needs to change social structure of our countries. You need to change economical approach, and then the technical part comes into the play. We are now, unfortunately, focusing more or less on technical parts. So we will insulate the houses. We will ban the boilers. We will install PV plants. We will install wind turbines, and we are not changing as a community. How are we using energy? What are we doing? How active are we in actually changing the environments around us? So that's to say what we need to do. But the reality in Croatia says that the politicians and the government are the ones making the decisions, and they are quite conservative in their approaches and their way of thinking, and in a lot of cases do not have physical capacity to prepare all the needed steps, and not to say to implement them and to verify the results. So, but we are pushing, and we will have to do, in hard times, the people are really innovative, and we will get through. I firmly believe that we will get to the point where we will say, okay, now I don't have anything to lose. I need to change something completely, and then it will be make it or break it, but I hope we will make it.
Yes, and then we have a question from Carsten Larsen. If you can turn on your microphone, Carsten.
Yes, first of all, thank you for having me. I'd like to ask a short question to all of you, all the three of you, and because it sounds like every country has their own challenges. Will it be possible to the EU and all European countries to reach coherency in reaching the very low goals, despite each and every country's individual situation and goals? I think we're in a hurry, and I'd like that some of you are talking on behalf of governments, countries, but the NGO from Denmark, I'm quite interested. I'll be quite interested to hear what you say. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I can start. Then, yeah, you guys can say something after me. But yeah, of course, the easiest way to be more ambitious in the different member states, if we have some EU targets and EU action plans to get where we need to be with the green transition. So, for instance, right now, the renewable energy target for the EU member states is 40% renewable energy in the energy mix at 2030. And with the REPowerEU, the plan from May, the Commission proposed it to be 45%. But what if we said it has to be, or the member state need to agree on it as well, but what if we said it should be 100%? Because we are in a hurry, as you say, Carsten. So it's really important with the ambitious, not only targets, but also plans. Because as we can see here in Denmark, we have a target and it's quite ambitious, but how do we get there? And that's one of the most important things to ask for. And if I can go back to Thomas's question earlier on, because it's I would like to explain how we're all connected. The wind turbines in Denmark are standing still, even though the wind is blowing, because the electricity grid in Denmark is too fragile, so they need to turn them off. And that's because the electricity grid is connected to Germany, but there is a bottleneck in the middle of Germany. So there can really go electricity from the northern part of Germany and Denmark to the southern part of Europe, or to the southern part of Germany. So if we on an EU level decided to work on the electricity grid, so we won't have to turn off or shut down the wind turbines, that would be excellent. Then we don't have to build as many wind turbines or as much solar power and hydropower, because all the fluctuating energy would just go down in the electricity grid and be some kind of storage. But we need to do that on at least an EU level.
Yeah, if I can come in, thanks, Julie. Great comments. So around that issue of the European Union and what can or should the European Union do, what I find intriguing always is that in times of crisis, and looking at two major crises of the 2 or 3 past couple of years, so we now have the energy crisis, but a couple of years ago, evidently, we also had the COVID-19 crisis. And so what we have with these crises is this big contradiction at the national level, or in the context of the EU, is that on the one hand, national governments turn to Europe as, okay, let them solve it, let Brussels solve it. But at the same time, Europe and Brussels, as a pax pro toto, is also made the scapegoat. It's the cause of all the problems. And that's where all the issues lie. And all problems are caused by Brussels. So I think there's this interesting and at times depressing contradiction that I find interesting. But the point being, I mean, for me, the European Union, or at least the European institutions, is, I mean, they have to set out the goals, they have to set out the policy frameworks, as Julie also explained in her presentation. They have to lay the groundwork. And then it's still up to the national governments to achieve those targets. You have to negotiate these, of course, as well through the Commission and the Council and the Parliament, the 3 major institutions. But I think they play an important role. And I mean, the European Union, I think it's absolutely crucial. And we couldn't, I mean, imagine if all countries separately, Denmark, Belgium, the Netherlands, but also countries in Southern Europe, would have to deal with the current crisis and the past crises as well, in particular the COVID crisis, on their own. Imagine that. I mean, that wouldn't be possible. The European Union, I mean, it's a very difficult theoretical thought exercise, of course, to imagine, okay, yeah, what if the European wouldn't have been there? But try to imagine that. And I think that in the current context and in the context of previous crises, we couldn't have done it. We couldn't deal with this at the level that we're dealing with it now without the European Union. I think it's as clear as that.
Thank you. And a plea from both experts to more collaboration on transnational level and EU level. I think we have another question.
Yeah, or Goran, do you want to?
Just a minute, to comment. You know, consensus between all EU countries it won't happen. You know, we can't reach consensus in my family, and there are just 3 of us. So 27 countries, completely different from Spain and Greece on the south to northern countries, which have completely different energy needs, completely different mentality. So consensus will not happen, but that does not mean that we cannot have common goal, which is pushed upon us by the Brussels, which is a good excuse, as you said, but it gives us this lighthouse towards which should go. So it's okay to be ambitious with the goals. It's okay to push us to do something, but it will be hard to achieve it. And luckily for us, even all of the crises which happened up to now show that the significant changes in small amount of time are possible. This meeting 2 years ago would be almost impossible because it's online. We had a COVID, everybody got used to online meetings. Now we are meeting online every day, a couple of times as it is normal. Up until yesterday, the gas was considered transition fuel for green transition. I think that it's off the table. So the gas is not transition fuel. We will use it as short as we can and as possible it is for us to change to something else. So the Nord Stream is off, connection to Russia is off. We won't be able to trust the Russians for the next 30 years. So basically gas is off the table. And again, this will push us to be more innovative. And I firmly believe that we won't reach the consensus, but we will make, I think, huger or bigger steps toward the sustainability in the next couple of years with the things that we cannot even think about. 10 years ago, if somebody would say, to describe today's meeting, they would say, you're crazy. We all have the smartphones with our lives in the smartphones. And 10 years ago, nobody was thinking about the smartphone. So until 2035, it's 10 years. So the technologies and the ways of doing things will be something that we today cannot imagine. And this is the best thing about the humanity, the innovativeness, when the crises are put upon us. And today we have like 5 big crises in the same time, and it's but it will be hard.
Yes, and then we have a question from Fleming. Fleming asks, can energy development such as solar energy and wind energy have an increasing beneficial effect in the coming years? And if you can just all three shortly touch upon it, because we don't have that much time left. And maybe you, Matthew, you can start.
Well, like I said earlier, in response to Thomas's point, I mean, I think there's no silver bullet, but if there are two technologies or two solutions that I think should be at the heart of the energy transition at the EU level, it's one, the massive rollout of solar and wind energy. And I think at the EU level, and at national levels as well, we're rolling out those plans, and capacity installation of wind and solar is indeed increasing. But that's not the silver bullet. It's not the only solution. I think the second major point is energy efficiency and demand reduction. I think it's all about insulating houses, buildings. It's something, I mean, in the energy sector, you see that basically it's regulated at the EU level. You've got the emissions trading. The energy sector falls under the ETS, of course, etc. But in those areas where there is still a lot of progress to be made, such as buildings, energy efficiency plays a major role, because it's not just about reducing greenhouse gas emissions. It's just about, I mean, the cheapest gas, the cleanest gas, the most affordable and most secure gas and fossil fuels or energy is the energy that we don't need. And then energy efficiency is the key. So on the one hand, yes, wind and solar, but second, energy efficiency and demand reduction. I think those are the two main pillars of any well thought through energy transition policy framework.
Yeah, if I may add upon this, I absolutely agree. The energy efficiency as a first, and then you had production, the wind and solar, and then in between is the transfer, the network. So we will need to completely change the energy transportation network within the Europe to adapt it to decentralized production of the energy which is happening, and energy storage. So the energy storage is it could be the silver bullet that really makes it easier, much easier to transfer and to survive, because we have the renewable energy in abundance at one point, and then we have times where we have zero renewable energy in production. So energy efficiency for sure, reduce as much as possible the needs, and then to try to cover it with renewable production. And in between, we need to store it, and we need to be able to transfer the energy from Norway to Greece in Europe. And this will be the biggest challenge to achieve.
And Julie?
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for the question, Fleming. it's really nice to hear that you have this concern, because in Denmark, the government talk a lot about huge energy islands and power to X and carbon capture and storage. But what about the things we can do right now, like the technologies as wind and solar? And it's really important that we get this planning starting now. Of course, it won't happen tomorrow. We have a goal in Denmark to quadruple the wind and solar on land until 2030. But yeah, it won't happen tomorrow, because there are all these what do you call it? You need to involve the citizens, and you need to involve the municipalities and all that. But luckily, the solution out of the fossil crisis and the problem with the climate change, that is the technologies that we already know. So it's just important that we get it going quickly.
Great, thank you. Actually, our time is up now, and even though we have many more questions, as I can understand, we have to say goodbye for now. I would like to say thank you to all of you participants and the experts joining from each of their country. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and I hope you feel likewise. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye bye. You bye bye.